So are you waiting for the next housing crash to go ahead and purchase your next home? Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't see that happening anytime soon and probably not again in our lifetime. So the housing market, like everything, it is supply and demand. And we have a lot more people that want houses because there's a lot more people who are in the country and on the planet. Back in 1900, there were 76 million people in the US, and now we have over 330 some million people in the US. In addition to that, the distribution by age is shifting as well. So back in 1950, 31% of the population were under 18, so there were a larger percentage of children, whereas in 2020, only 22%. And that's partly because people are living longer, and people who are living longer are staying in their homes, so the houses that normally would have been sold when people passed away are now being kept by the people staying in their homes longer because we do have an aging population thanks to better health and better medicine. Now, part of the reason that people are even talking about a housing market crash or thinking about it is because we experienced it in our lifetime. It was not that long ago when 2007, 2008 hit, the market crashed. And I'm not sure about the US, it's probably about the same as what it was in Hampton Roads, and down to 2012, housing prices just continued to sink. And because we saw that in our lifetime, we're like, oh, that's a reality now. And I'll tell you, before the housing crash, nobody had seen one in their lifetime. So that's why the housing crash took us by surprise, because again, we don't look back necessarily historically, and we just look at what's happened in our lifetime. However, the housing market crash, though, was an anomaly because, as you can see here, there was no crashing before. It was just sort of a steady upward stream of prices until we came to this head. And now this was all driven by the bad loans, because loans were given out so freely to speculators. And so people who had no real vested interest in the home, it was easy for them to walk away when they had they realized that everything was kind of crashing around them. And so it became just a house of cards where it all collapsed on itself. And understand, bubbles are not unique. It's just unique in the housing market at that time period. We've had bubbles for years. You may have heard about the tulip bubble in Holland back in the 1600s. Probably remember the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s. Maybe you even remember the Beanie Baby bubble when people were actively trading Beanie Babies like they were worth a bunch, and you could probably buy a truckload of Beanie Babies now for a few dollars. And another thing, and this I found very interesting, was looking at housing prices not just on the cash to purchase the house, but adjusted for inflation. So now when you adjust for inflation, you actually can see a lot more movement in the chart here. Still shows our big bubble here, but when adjusted for inflation, we actually have not gotten to the 2008 prices yet. In the previous chart, you would have seen that our prices are above what they were in 2008, but again, we've seen some rapid inflation over the past few years, and so we're still technically below that when you adjust for inflation. Now, the one thing that I haven't addressed yet is the affordability factor. So when you look at the median household income over the years versus housing prices, there definitely seems to be like there's a disparity, or we're heading towards a big disparity there. And again, supply and demand being what it is, I don't believe we're going to have any kind of big drop in the pricing of houses, though things may slow down a little bit. What I do see happening over time is converting to the smaller house kind of thing. The tiny home movement people have been talking about for a while. I just don't think we've gotten to the point where there's been enough pressure on housing that the communities have been willing to do that. because a lot of this has to do with zoning issues about being able to put a whole bunch of houses in a small area. The other thing that like big cities are doing is allowing commercial space to be converted into housing. I think we're going to start to see a lot of mixed use properties more so, and seeing a lot of that, because that is definitely something that needs to be addressed, is the lack of affordable housing for people just getting started. And then the other alternative, which people have been doing for years, is shared housing with roommates or multi-generational housing, so people staying in houses longer. And again, because there is that gap between the amount of houses that are being built and the amount of new families that are being formed that want houses. But that may be, it's just there's a need to kind of shift what people want, in that when people get older, they don't have the expectation that they're immediately going to move out of the house. They're just expecting that they're going to be sticking around in the parents' or grandparents' household a little bit longer. So all that being said, I just don't see any kind of market crash, any dramatic change coming anytime soon. We've definitely seen a slowdown in sales, but we've also seen a slowdown in listings, so it's kept the market prices steadily going up, and don't see any change in that in the foreseeable future.